Death is a horrible thing for the living. The dead don't actually seem to care, at least not the ones who've had near-death experiences, which means they died and then they came back. They said that they only returned under duress. They didn't really care about any of the people here. They wanted to stay in heaven and travel the universe forever. Then an angel comes and grabs them by the leg and says, it's not your time, get back there. Then they fall to earth, mad about it, talking about, I wanted to stay up there. I wanted to stay in the light. You kids. And the kids are right there next to them listening to this whole story. I watch a lot of NDEs, and that's a fair summary. It's a fair summary of most of them. Now, some of them, they do go to hell and they come back and they beg for a second chance. But the majority of them, they go into the light and they speak to grandma and they completely forget about their lives here on earth. But when living people lose their loved ones, it's horrible. It is physically debilitating to lose a close family member. That's why decent employers will give you 2 weeks off so that you can properly grieve, you can go through your rituals, you can say goodbye, because otherwise you're useless at work. But some people, they cannot say goodbye. The loss is just too great. Maybe they have loose ends that need to get tied up. They need more contact with their loved ones. And we can all understand this desire. But is it even possible? There are some respectable voices that say that it is possible, but the history is dubious. We will get into that in this video. Now, I take a neutral position on this. I know that speaking to the dead is banned. It is banned in the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, and many believers take that same strong stance. Deuteronomy 18:10-12, let no one be found among you who practices divination or sorcery or who consults the dead. It used to be known as necromancy, and it was bad news. Necromancy really is communicating with the dead for the purpose of gaining some sort of knowledge or advantage on earth. Like your dead relative who died in 2003 is going to be able to help you in the crypto markets, but whatever. I'm sure they're mad that you bothered them to begin with. This is what you're asking them for? Anyway, this practice, it was used prior to Judaism, and whoever wrote the Bible had to put in, do not use the divination that the Egyptians or the Greeks are using around you. You are better than them. You're better than that. You're better than that. Now, the Catholics will say that you are speaking to a demon because the dead, they're with God, they're in heaven. You're speaking to a demon who is trying to trick you. That is Catholic lore. Did you see that movie Talk to Me? It's about this like spirit sculpture hand, and the people who hold it, they can speak to people on the other side, but it's a demon and it tricks you. It just gets into your mind and starts playing games. Go see it. It is fantastic. Now, there is a lesser known movie about communicating with the dead. It's called Baghead, and it is super, super slept on. The basic premise is that you can go down into the basement of this old hotel and talk to your loved one for about 2 minutes. This creature can channel your loved one for about 2 minutes, but anything longer than that, and this evil spirit will seriously start to mess with your head. Now, of course, we come from a Judeo-Christian culture, so our culture and our horror, they're going to reflect those old warnings about necromancy and things like that. It's going to be a cautionary tale. And I think that these are both great movies, but they are not documentaries. They're horror movies for Halloween. Now, there's a lot of politics involved in religion, so I can't say if the Bible, the authors of the Bible were correct or if they were just trying to limit individual power and agency. Like they wanted the church and the temple to have the power and not the psychics or the cunning folk or the sorcerers. Now, there is something to be said for completely avoiding fortune tellers who they make promises that they can get these messages from your loved ones, but these people are often scamming you. So the Bible could be warning against giving your money and your power to foreigners who promise what they just can't deliver. Even now, psychics, they say, for entertainment purposes only. Remember Miss Cleo, did you see that documentary? For entertainment purposes only, because it would be considered fraudulent otherwise. And there were even laws on the books into the 20th century. Anyway, there is your disclaimer. The Bible says don't try it, and we know that a lot of people promising to give you messages from the other side from your loved ones, they're just scammers trying to get at your money and win your trust. Now, I don't know how cynical the early rabbis were. Was one like, are these dummies really gonna give their money to these con artists? And then another was just like, tell them God said no. Say God said don't do it. Sure. Now it's in the Bible. Do you guys remember Sylvia Browne on Montel Williams? If you remember that, it is time to stretch and to take your collagen, because that show came on like in the 90s and 2000s. If you skip school, you can watch this psychic basically tell these people everything, this audience members everything. She knew the answer to all of their questions. Now let me see if they'll let me play the clip or if they get me on copyright.
Yes. I don't know how she died. Please, if you can, how did she die?
She was shot. Circumstances around her death?
So there is no way that she would know all this stuff, at least not for everyone. But the audience, they just ate it up. John Edwards, he was another one, another famous medium, and he had a show where he could speak to dead people, but it was cold reading. Now, cold reading is like, oh, I'm hearing someone with the name M in this general area, and someone would say, oh, that's my brother Micah. And if that person saying it were young, then he would know that Micah must have died young. So it was, oh, I see that it was a tragic passing. Of course, he was a young person. And then the person in the audience, they offer up the information, and the medium or the psychic, they twist it to make it seem like they knew this information from a supernatural source. But it's like, no, you told them everything. Or they say some super, super obvious thing like, I see that you loved your brother very much. Like, of course you loved your brother very much. But that's what cold reading is, basically. Now, the original mediums, they were a pair of sisters called the Fox sisters in upstate New York, in Arcadia, which is near Rochester, and they lived in the mid-1800s. There's been a lot of upstate New York supernatural talk on this channel this month. It's actually a very active place spiritually. It seems so cold and uptight, but this place is wild, especially in the 1800s. Now, in the 1840s, the Fox sisters, they are credited with starting the spiritualist movement, and they claim that they could speak to the dead through these series of taps and knocks, you know? Because of their location in upstate New York and their family connections, they were taken in by some radical Quaker friends. And the spiritualism movement became intertwined with abolition and equal rights for women, which were big issues for the Quakers. And yes, we're going to discuss this on my podcast on Sunday, because it does seem like history repeating itself. Like, why are these righteous people also tied up with this batch of crazy thing? Does this happen every single century? We'll discuss. Imagine being in the 1850s and you have to choose between apathy on one side and crazy people on the other. You're like, look, I'm for equality of the races and the sexes, but do we have to believe that these girls are channeling dead people? Because that's a little crazy. Anyway, the Quakers are actually known as the Society of Friends, but Quaker is a derogatory term and it just kind of stuck. And it's a real shame that abolition and the spiritualist movement became intertwined, because the Fox sisters later admitted in the 1880s that they made it all up, that it was in fact a hoax, that they could not speak to the dead people. They were making the cracking sounds by cracking their joints. By that point, it had been 40 years and they had full careers as mediums. Their followers didn't believe their confession. They thought it had been coerced, that they were just saying it. So they kept believing in mediumship, and the movement that they started had taken on a life of its own. However, it's not like people in the 1840s and 50s when they first came public with these claims. It's not like they were a bunch of chumps. It's not like they didn't spot what was going on. There was even an article in the New York Times calling this deception, but the people wanted to believe it so badly, they just ignored all the skeptics. And also, some will say that the modern spiritualist movement is actually started by this man called Emanuel Swedenborg, and this was in the late 1600s and 1700s, and he was a mystic. I don't think he was a fraud at all. He wrote many books about his visions, and he could have been experiencing like these DMT dumps or something biochemical like that. The Fox sisters really discredited the movement, and I'm sure there are plenty of other frauds involved, just like there's many frauds involved in Christianity right now. I'm not saying that everyone who participates in spiritualism or tries to speak with the dead is a fraud. It's just that these particular girls were, and they admitted it. And they were probably just bored, and they had just moved into this farmhouse that the locals considered haunted, and then this joke, it just got out of hand. It's really the adults in this story, they're the ones that took it to the next level. I can't even imagine a young girl, even at that time, would understand just how deeply those adults wanted to believe that they could speak to their loved ones, because remember, a lot more people died young back then. Now, one of the reasons that spiritualism took off in the mid-1800s was that the established churches were failing miserably. They didn't let women participate. They weren't, or most of them weren't, taking a strong stance on abolition, which is anti-slavery. And what did they have to say about the ongoing wars with the Indians, the native Indians? I wouldn't want to go to those churches either. Plus, spiritualism allowed people to rely on their own intuition and their own experiences. What they knew deep down was true. They knew that they were communicating with their loved ones. And the papers at the time, they reported ghost stories as if they were established fact. Now, believe it or not, journalism in the 1800s and early 1900s was actually less reliable than it is today. And that's why when you see an old news story, you really got to take that with a grain of salt, because did it happen? Did the journalist get swindled? Like, what are his sources? We can't cross-check going back that far, or it's much more difficult. Now, one quick thing to note, notice how many women are involved in spiritualism, both then and now. It's got a lot to do with women's intuition and us being more emotionally aware, which we are. Women were picked out as witches because they controlled life and death, because often they worked as healers and midwives, and it made men very uncomfortable. But also, women are more likely to speak to psychics, at least in the West. And perhaps this connection with spiritualism and women has a lot to do with them being completely excluded from church leadership. And that's despite women being clearly more spiritual, like God entrusted women to carry life, yet men kept them from church leadership, and often still do. It's like, sir, I will come to you when I need advice on decking and plumbing. Please stay out of the spiritual realm. Thank you. No, you can't have 10% of my salary. Are you high? I gotta stop drinking that communion wine. Now, spiritualism continued to gather steam through the early 1900s. So that's around World War I, which was a very bloody war, a lot of battlefield deaths, and people were desperate. But it did lose steam in the 1930s and 1940s when more of these mediums were exposed as frauds. However, belief in ghosts never fully went away. The Ouija board has been popular, so popular that you can buy it in the toy store. They were mass produced in the 1970s and up till now. And we've all seen Amityville Horror and that series about the Warren family, who have also been accused of frauds. But still, those stories have made their way into legend, into popular culture, into the zeitgeist. And then came, of course, the 1990s with Sylvia Browne and Montel Williams. And yes, I did just yada, yada, yada over the whole 20th century, but I don't want this video to be 2 hours long. Anyway, recently, I saw a news story that showed that there is a revival in speaking to the dead, and in a different way. We covered spirit boxes on the CP podcast. I'm not sure if you remember. I'll just give you the gist. A spirit box is a device that quickly switches between radio frequencies, like a walkie-talkie, changes so quickly. And spirits are supposed to be able to manipulate it so they can give you a message. So when you look into it, when you really look into it, like, it's kind of questionable at best when you actually hear the raw footage. Okay, so that's what a spirit box is. Be prepared to cry, because this next part is brutal. I will try to play the clip, but if they get me on copyright, I'll also explain it too. This little girl from New York, she's about 12 years old. She was about 12 years old, and she snuck out of her family home to go meet someone she met on the internet, her and this other little girl, so that they could ride subway trains, which is a very stupid thing that kids do. They're so young. But guess what happened? Both girls, they died violent and pointless deaths. And her little sister gave an interview to the reporters. And this poor thing, she's only 11 years old, but she was so well composed. And I thought, it's strange for her to be so well put together right now after what has happened. But then she ended the interview and said that her mother had actually hired a woman with a spirit box, and they were speaking to the lost girl.
My mom, she has this lady, and she was talking to my sister, like, through the spirit box. And she's been sending a lot of messages to me, like, don't miss me, like, don't cry. I hate to see you cry, so, like, everything's okay, I'm happy. I'll come back soon.
Okay, so I'm going to link the GoFundMe for this girl at the bottom for her family. Maybe the parents can make life a little bit easier for the surviving sister. Remember, those parents, they didn't let her go out. They didn't lose track of her daughter. She snuck out of the house, and they were surprised to find that she wasn't in her bedroom. This really could have happened to anyone. I remember an episode of Captain Planet where it was especially brutal. There was a character who lost his head riding the subway. And at the time I thought, well, that's really harsh. But it did give people a warning, give kids a warning to not ever ride the subway. And kids today don't have Captain Planet. So please give to this girl's GoFundMe and give to her parents. That's a whole thing to say that kids are dumb. They don't know not to do this. Okay, back to topic. These spirit boxes are part of life now. And this mother, she sought out this medium to speak with her lost daughter through this newish technology. And if it helps her feel better, I can't say that that's a bad thing. If you remember that episode of the CP podcast, I was very skeptical about that. I continue to be skeptical about this technology. However, if I were that girl's mom, I'd rather believe the lie than face that trauma full on. And I don't believe that death is the end. And I've seen too many NDEs, plus my own experiences, to believe that death is the end. But this spirit box thing, I don't know. You let me know in the comments what you think. Is this medium actually communicating with the daughter through this box? Do you think that this is a fraud, or do you think that this is a little white lie that's helping more than it's hurting? You let me know. I've recently seen a lot of posts on Instagram that say that quantum physics proves that there is life after death, and that is not exactly true. Honestly, quantum physics is very complicated, and I know enough about it to know that it is hard to understand, even if you do it for a living. If this channel ever goes dark and the only time you see me is in a bathrobe, like throwing cats at the neighborhood kids, you will know that I decided to study quantum physics. Don't try to rescue me. I'm happier where I am in my bathrobe. It is a common New Age trope in the New Age community that quantum physics supports their worldview. And I'm wondering where these hippies find all the time to do their experiments between having orgies and smoking weed. I'm sure some of them can still figure it out, but most of them I'm like, side-eye. Do you remember when Nature Boy used to teach those courses on quantum physics? It's like, where are you finding time for all this quantum physics between having your wives fight on the beach, Nature Boy? Come on. Now, quantum physics certainly destroys the old Newtonian worldview that the universe is mechanical and predictable, and we just have to look at it and know the math and we'll figure it out. It's like, no, especially not on a tiny, tiny level. Now, I don't know if quantum physics necessarily supports any worldview, except, damn, science is hard, yo. Now, the old folks are just like, we can't know the mind of God. They don't even bother. And I'm like, oh, y'all are just so much happier, aren't you? Anyway, these Instagram posts, they're referring to this theory called Biocentrism, which basically states that the material world came from consciousness and not the other way around. Therefore, when the body is destroyed, consciousness still exists. And this is a theory by this man, a medical doctor called Robert Lanza. So the Instagram posts, they're a little misleading. Quantum physics does not prove that there is an afterlife, but it is, in my opinion, a solid pseudo-scientific spiritual theory. It's just not science, because where's the experiment here? There's no experiment that proves this. Can we all get together and think up a new sun? The solar system was here before consciousness, at least human consciousness. Can we all just meditate and form a new solar system, especially one without all these asteroids coming by the Earth every few minutes? No. So to me, the math just isn't mathing here. Now, we did speak about Nick Bostrom and the simulation theory a few weeks ago in the Peter Thiel video. We just touched on it very briefly. If we are living in a simulation, which is not proven, by the way, then there would be life after death if we were a player. Maybe we are Roy from Rick and Morty. Do you remember that Rick and Morty episode? And for those of you who don't watch, Roy is this game, this intergalactic game where people play and they live like this regular guy named Roy. And when they die, the game is over. These are all very interesting theories and ideas, but I don't know how you would prove them. It doesn't mean that there is no afterlife, and it doesn't mean that you cannot communicate with your loved ones who have passed on, just that these clickbait Instagram posts are not hard science. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I don't even know if physics can answer questions like, is there life after death? Because they don't claim to know anything outside of our universe. So if the afterlife is in another universe, they just throw their hands up and like, yo, that's not my problem. I'm trying to deal with this universe. Anyway, one last thing I want to bring up is by a respectable scientist who claims that she is able to communicate with those who have passed on. You may have seen this episode of Diary of a CEO with Dr. Tara Swart. It's very popular. I'll link it at the bottom if you have not seen it. Basically, she proposes that we can speak to those who have passed through messages, through symbols. They don't come to us as ghosts. They send us symbols that we will recognize. She lost her husband to cancer, which is super unfortunate. But over a period of time, she has developed a way of sending and receiving messages from him. How it works is that the symbols, they are always there, but we open up our senses to be more aware of them. We sharpen our intuition. And I think that this is fascinating. I cannot discount it because I have lost people that I love, and I do see things that make me think, that's interesting. Like maybe they are trying to communicate with me. And you can call me crazy in the comments, but it'll be something that's really not common that I wouldn't see on a normal day. I was like, Now, Tara Swart has written a book, so if you are interested, take a look at that. Do you think she's onto something, or do you think this is all just wishful thinking? For me, I don't think that death is the end. I have lost loved ones who have come to me in dreams after they've passed. I have experiences that cannot be explained by the science as we know it right now. And I've seen too many near-death experience videos, so many near-death experience videos. Actually, check out that video I did on that. And I don't believe all of those people are lying. Now, some might be doing it for clout. Apparently, that is a big thing in the Mormon community. But there are too many people who have absolutely nothing to gain from telling their story. Is my belief in the afterlife hard science? No. But also, I do believe that most mediums are lying. And I don't believe in spirit boxes. And I think that Dr. Tara Swart might be onto something. So basically, it's complicated, and that's okay, because this is a complicated topic. And I think that's funny because it means if there is life after death, which is not certain, but if there is, it means our loved ones are busy. They're not going to come and visit us, at least not often, and it's kind of insulting. Like, damn, you're just flying across the galaxy. You can't even send a butterfly for my birthday. But you know what? If a person still has to send birthday texts, what's even the point of being dead? What's the point of dying if you still gotta send birthday texts? Anyway, Halloween is next week. It's a time of the year where the veil between the living and dead is supposed to be the thinnest. Do you celebrate any of these holidays, Day of the Dead or All Souls Day? And what are your rituals for it? I am so curious. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this video? Tell me your experiences, please, or your lack of experiences, because that's interesting too. Do you think it's all just hoaxes and wishful thinking? You let me know. Happy Halloween, and I will see you next week.